I'm John Travis on July 9th, 2026 in Charlottesville, Virginia, talking to Peter Russell in Sebastopol, California. And I've known of you for like 40 years, and this first time we've met. So
Yes.
I want to find out who you are and why.
Okay. I'm looking forward to this.
Let's start with
If
your early childhood, birth order, siblings, influences of what led you to get interested in global brains.
yes, okay. I'm eldest child, um, born just south of London, but grew up on the south coast near Brighton, overlooking the sea, which was wonderful. And
Nice.
the back garden went out onto what are called the Downs. They're actually ups, they're hills. There's a whole range of hills that goes across the southern England. They come out at the White Cliffs of Dover, but they go on for about 150 miles west. So I grew up in nature, really, in a small village, but just so loved going for long walks over the hills and in the woods and things. So that was part of my influences. I think my father was a significant influence. Um, I had a penchant for mathematics, and he did too. And he sort of taught me various things that he knew. And mathematics became my love at school. When I was even just at primary school, I loved exploring things. And then as I went to high school, I started reading books about mathematics and got really fascinated by them, by the whole thing. And it seemed to me, I used to say, God must be a mathematician because, maths basically explains how the universe unfolds. It doesn't explain what is there. It has nothing to say about what is there, but it explains how it all, how the energy and things works. So, so that was a strong influence. I was also somewhat of a rebel as well. I was stood outside the culture. Yeah, I didn't accept things because they were orthodox. I rejected religion when I was about 13. I was brought up, Church of England, which 95% of English people were in those days. We went to church on Sundays once a month or so, which was good enough probably for the sins we'd accumulated. And it was something that people did in the village, local village church. And I went through the process of confirmation, and which people go through in Protestant churches and also Catholic churches. And I realized then that the creed that I just thought was something you just chanted in church along with other things, prayers and things and psalms, that the Nicene Creed was something I was meant to believe. I can still remember most, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, the maker of all things, etc., etc., etc. And I thought, I'm meant to believe this? Way, as a budding scientist, no way could I believe that stuff. And so I just stopped. I just said to my parents, I'm not going to church anymore. And I never have done, except for the occasional, weddings or funerals. But other than
Mhm.
that, and years later, when my mother was reading one of my books, she said, I never believed in that stuff anyway myself.
Now
So,
she tells you.
yeah. So I was not interested at all in religion or spirituality. To me, they were sort of synonymous. And I was interested in maths and physics particularly. Um, so that led me to go to Cambridge in England, which was the best place to study maths. And for a while, I was tutored by Stephen Hawking.
Really?
Yeah, he could still talk and walk. And his illness was coming on,
Uh-huh.
but he didn't. He could walk with crutches. He didn't need a wheelchair or anything at that stage. And his speech was fine, but a little bit slurred, and his movements were a bit spasmodic. But even then, we knew he was probably working on his early stuff on black holes. Then we were talking about late 60s, and he was yeah, he was fascinating,
No doubt.
very gentle, kind person with a sense of humor, great sense of humor. And so I was studying mathematics and theoretical physics, which are basically applied maths and theoretical physics are actually the same course at Cambridge, given by the same lecturers in different buildings. One one course is given in the mathematics building, the others given in the physics building. So, and I loved it, but there was this nagging thing that was there all along is however much physics I do or understand, it never is going to touch on the question of why am I conscious?
Hmm.
And I was getting fascinated by consciousness because this was the 60s and that's what people were doing. It's like, well, some of us, a small group of us, like looking at consciousness and things subjectively, taking various medicines, etc., exploring consciousness. And I just realized I wanted to understand consciousness, what it was about. And I realized physics wasn't going to do it. So I took another course, a year at Cambridge in experimental psychology as well. I tagged that on, thinking that psychology would begin to answer these questions. But no, I learned a lot about the brain and memory and all this stuff. But no one was interested in consciousness. Hardly came up. And then I realized that people who were really interested in consciousness were in studying consciousness were the spiritual adepts, the yogis, the monks who used meditation as a way of exploring consciousness. And I thought, consciousness is a totally subjective thing. We can't study it by putting electrodes on the brain. We can study the brain, but not consciousness itself. So you have to actually explore your own consciousness. And that got me interested in meditation and TM initially, transcendental
Hmm.
meditation. And that took me off to India. And I studied with the Maharishi in his ashram in Rishikesh. I became a teacher of meditation and came back to Cambridge and set up a meditation center and continued my studies as well because I was fascinated by computing, which was just coming online. Computers were just starting. And I actually sort of been studying the logic of computers and building my own little tiny computers in my garage at home. And so I took a postgraduate degree in computer science, thinking that's what I would love to do. I saw that would be my career. Most totally out of date degree you could possibly have. We were programming in binary machine code.
Oh, really?
No one knows how to do that these days except chip makers. It was, I mean, I loved it. It was hands on with the computer. You actually program the computer's store directly, feeding code in.
Oh, you weren't doing punch cards?
No, we had no, we had paper tape.
Uh-huh.
That was yeah, punch cards were IBM. We had a big IBM machine upstairs in the lab, and I was working on a smaller PDP-7, which it was the first computer to have a screen. And I was working, my thesis was on linking the two computers together. So
Really? Wow.
linking this big IBM mainframe upstairs with a cable the thickness of my arm, which was probably a thousandth the capacity of a USB cable these days, plugged into this PDP-7. And so I was actually programming the computer to do visual stuff. I was exploring multi-dimensional images and things. Anyway, that's a whole other story. And so then I sort of went on. Well, IBM then came. It's what they call the milk round. IBM would come around to universities looking for interesting talent, and obviously they're looking at the computer lab. And I think they interviewed two or three people, and I was one of them. They wanted me to go and join their research labs working on visual displays. And I've always been interested in visual displays, always. And then about the same time, because I'd done very well at Cambridge, I got offered a scholarship, PhD scholarship for free to do what I liked.
Nice. And in Cambridge.
Yes. And I I wanted at this stage to do a PhD on meditation. So I went to the professor of psychology, who was rather, old, proper, stuffy professor, who said meditation is not a respectable subject for scientific study. We're talking about the 60s here, or early
Yeah.
70s now. He said, if you want to be fringe, you can do hypnosis. And I wasn't interested. And I mentioned this to a fellow in the computer lab, just as an interesting story. That weekend, he went home to Jet, where he lived in Bristol, and he was telling his father this story. And his father happened to be the professor of education at Bristol University. And on Tuesday of that week, he had a lunch with the professor of psychology at the university. And he told the professor of psychology my story. He said, "Oh, he can come here if he wants." So through a series of coincidences and other things, I ended up working on a PhD on meditation. So meditation became more and more important in my life. And my first book was actually on TM, Transcendental Meditation. But the whole networking of computers, I was still fascinated by it. And I realized the future of computers was not just building huger and bigger mainframes, but was actually the linking together of computers, which is what I'd been doing, the very first linking together of computers. And I saw that that's where the future of computing was going to be, was computers linking together. And this is way before the internet existed
Oh,
or anything
yeah.
like that, way before that. And that led me to the writing of The Global Brain. And
Oh,
well, several things led me to write The Global Brain. One, this idea that we were like the nerve cells, human beings were like the nerve cells of the planet. And the way the brain develops is by growing interconnections. Very early on in the womb of
yeah.
things, the brain is growing interconnections. And as we learn, it's all about growing interconnections. And I saw this was what was going to be happening to humanity. Through the linking of computers, we'd be linking our minds together.
Hmm.
And so that was an important part of it. Uh, James Lovelock had just come out with the Gaia hypothesis,
Right.
and which is saying, the whole Earth, living systems of the Earth act like a single organism. And you can say, the rainforests are like the lungs of the planet and things like this. He didn't touch on where humanity fits in. He left humanity out of all the natural systems. And I thought, well, hang on,
Oh,
humanity's here with this young upstart on the planet, but how do we fit in? And people say, well, we're like a sort of, maybe we're misfit planetary cancer. And I was thinking, no, we're like the neurons of the global brain.
yeah.
And so that also led to the idea of the global brain, but also the question, are we going to become is it going to become a sane global brain or an insane global brain? And I think
Yeah.
that question is still there.
Definitely.
And I realized the difference is our consciousness, our values. And what I realized in India was, well, first of all, I realized there was something to spirituality. I realized there was something behind all the great religions, beneath them, something they started from, some very basic insights they started from, which over time had got lost, misunderstood, added to, whatever. And that essential spiritual insight became a religion. And often it had, people say, Jesus would turn in his grave. I think most spiritual teachers would turn in their grave if they knew what had become of their teaching. And
Yeah.
so I was interested in what is the essence of spirituality. That became a lifelong theme for me. And realizing that this was needed on the planet. We needed the awakening that the great teachers were talking about. We needed that spiritual awakening because most of the problems that we face on the planet or in our personal lives, social lives, political lives come from egoic thinking, come from, wanting power, money, pride,
Fame.
various things. Yeah. And so I became convinced that this was this was really important. And that's why I was teaching meditation, running a meditation center, and realizing that for the global brain to become a sane global brain, we needed that awakening en masse. And so the global brain was also uh, pushing for that. It was an argument for we need to have spiritual awakening on this planet as well. So it's those things coming together that really made the book. And it caught on. I mean, the book came out in 82, 83 in America. It was called The Awakening Earth in England, but the publishers in America thought The Global Brain was a much better title, and I think they were right in hindsight. And what happened was I made a video. Now, in those days, videos were new. I mean,
Yeah.
we had reel to reel videos, huge, thick videotapes, which people were using to record talks. And cassette videos had just come out. We
The
had,
U-Matics were the first to 3/4 inch. Yeah.
yes, yes. And then we went down to VHS
VHS
and
and Beta.
yeah, beta, yeah. And I was another, I said, I've always been interested in visuals because there's many threads here. By this time, I was also running seminars in corporations,
Mm.
and IBM was a major client of mine. And they would have me go to speak at their big conferences, and they were really into large visual presentations. We would have um, three projectors. We have 27 computers, nine computers focusing on one projector, nine on another. And so we had three screens side by side across a theater, which gave you a huge, wide vision. And with nine computers, you can change the slide projector. Well, we actually had nine slide projectors focusing on one screen. And you can change the slides so fast, you can produce real looking animations, graphs that move, people that move.
Mm.
It was fast enough. I got fascinated by that. And when I went on lecture tours, first of all, when the book was first published, I had my own very simple two projector show, which I lugged around with me. But nobody else was doing this at the time. People were sometimes showing slides, but I had this show that would sort of animate and do things very simply. And people were saying it's no good having an audio of your talks. We need to have a video of it. And so I actually, the first time I did the talk against a friend's bedroom wall. He had a video camera, and we produced a very simple VHS. And then about 6 months later, a friend saw my talk and said, we must video this. And so we started doing a proper video, this time using more projectors. And that became the video of the global brain. And that got known far more than just the book, because books, they're physical. But
Yeah.
video, and you can buy a new book or recommend it or lend it, but videos are copyable. And so people were copying the video and passing it on, which I was totally happy with. People say, do you mind people copying videos? No, it's getting the word out there. And so the video was being shown all over the world at conferences, in schools, meetings and things. It really touched a nerve. And
Well,
that's
that
what
was
really,
how
I think,
I found out about you. I'm not sure how I got the video. We had a VHS and it was a professional one. We must have bought it somewhere. We
or
showed
it's
it to
someone,
hundreds of people. We did a
yeah,
weekend seminar on from domination to partnership, and that was one of the high points. We didn't have a projector, so I think we were sitting in front of a big 24-inch
yeah,
Trinitron or something like that.
yes, yes, that's the way people watched it. Yes, we didn't have, nobody had home video projectors in those days. That
Yeah.
that came that came later. No,
So
we
you
watched it
made
on,
that film yourself?
yeah.
Wow. I I don't know what happened to it. I'd love to. Are there any versions online I could
Oh
refresh
yes,
my memory?
it's on my YouTube channel. You
Oh,
can find it on
good.
my website. Um, yeah, people still come across it. I mean, it's so out of date now, but that doesn't really matter. It's still the
History.
message, I think, is the same. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I think really sort of put me on the map with people. The video,
for,
more than the book, the video.
for sure with me. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, at times, I mean, several times I would be with a friend who had a friend. One time I was walking to a friend. She was in her kitchen. We were chatting. Another friend was there hanging out doing something. And she turned and said, "Are you Peter Russell?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I recognize your voice from the video."
Yeah.
Exactly that. Because I don't appear in the video. It's just
Right.
my
It's your
voice.
voice.
Just a
Yeah.
voiceover. Yeah. So, so that was really significant. And that led me to, by this time I had a writing career. At first, I had no inkling that I would ever write a book. At school, English was my worst subject.
Yeah. Me
In
too.
fact, no, my real worst subject was Latin. Latin was my worst subject.
Yeah.
English was my second worst. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, they were my top.
Yeah.
And, when I was at university, the only words I ever wrote were like QED or therefore, something like that. And so I had no idea I could write English. And this idea for this book on TM came about. And I decided to write it and had a friend who was an editor who said, this is okay. There's a few, grammatical things, but actually, your writing is fine. And I thought, oh, what?
And
And
this
but
is
this,
before the global brain, right? We're
but
back
this was
in.
the TM technique.
Yeah.
And then I had an agent and I did a second book was, yeah, the book after that, or two books after that was a book called The Brain Book. But this time I was working with Tony Buzan, teaching mind maps. That's what led me into corporations.
Oh, mind maps. I forgot about that. That was all big
Yeah,
in the 80s. Yeah.
yes. So yeah, I met up with Tony and I joined his little group of about six people teaching mind maps everywhere and corporations and things. And where was I going with that?
Writing books.
Right, yeah. So this was a book on mind mapping and the brain, and my agent said, "You've got a career ahead of you as a writer if you want." And I thought, what? That's the last thing that was on my mind. And then a bit later, I realized, people say, "Oh, your writing is so clear. I really understand it." And I realized I'm not a beautiful, flowery writer. I don't create wonderful prose expressions that people will, quote and things. I don't do that. I actually write like a mathematician. That's my
Ah,
training. It's like, we know this, therefore this. We bring in this bit of information, and this may be yours. And I build a case for anything. So my books were actually a logical argument towards a conclusion.
hmm.
But it didn't look like that because it's very, I had my own tone of writing, which is like trying to keep it personal and things. So, funnily enough, I became a writer because of my training in math.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, go on.
I want to go back a little more in your childhood and influences like siblings and uh,
Oh,
how was school,
okay. Sorry,
primary
I went
school?
way ahead. I went way ahead. Um, Siblings, I had two younger brothers, one 3 years younger, the other 5 years younger. I mean, we were just boys. We did things together, we fought together, whatever it was. We had little, I think my mum had a hard time bringing up three rambunctious boys.
Hmm.
Um, I think because they were younger, they didn't have any real influence on me, I'd say. I probably may have had influence
Hmm.
on them. School, well, first went to school, those days you went to school at 5. Um, First 2 years were just, don't remember much. They were very basic, learning to spell, that sort of stuff, very basic arithmetic. Um, that was, a lot of it. Um, but I do remember, I was remembering yesterday, one of those memories that comes out of the blue, I've never remembered since, that this was after the Second World War. It was, I was going to school 5, 6 years after the war had ended, and things were in very short supply. Food was rationed,
Hmm.
almost everything was rationed, and gradually it came off. And so was electricity and power. In the middle of the classroom at school, we had one classroom for our group, our age. We had this huge um, coal stove in the center, round cylindrical coal stove. And in the winter, the first thing the teacher would do is actually light the coal stove and get it moving, warming, so we could actually take off our outer clothes and actually be in a warmer environment. So things like that. Life was very different then. We
Mm,
didn't have, we'd have, power cuts because the power stations were still being rebuilt and things. Water would come on and off. We just lived with that. That's the way it was. And just gradually things got back towards quote normal. School, I think it was about the time I was 8 or 9 that my interest in maths really started coming out and exploring that. And so I was doing well in that. And so well, in fact, that I sort of went to high school a year earlier.
hmm.
They pushed me ahead, which I think was a huge mistake. My parents,
Often,
my
yeah,
pa-
that's
my parents were
socially a
very proud.
disaster.
Our son is so bright. He's been pushed ahead a year. Wonderful. This is great. Hindsight, no, not a
Yeah.
great thing. Yeah,
My
yeah,
wife's brother had that experience by 3 years and it was terrible.
yeah, yeah. You're growing up, you're going through puberty, etc., with a group who's 1 year older than you, which makes a
Hmm.
big difference at those stages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any girlfriends or boyfriends or?
No, well, girlfriends. Not not in the way we think of girlfriends. I mean, yes, at school I would have. I remember when I was about 8 or 9, there was somebody who lived down the road. This girl called Pam, and we sort of hang out together sometimes after school and do things and play together. I remember saying to my mother, "I want to marry her,"
Ah,
but no, these were girl friends who were girls. We had boyfriends. Um, no, didn't really start till I was about 15, 16, having sort of girlfriends. I was I was actually very shy with women, and I think that was partly this thing of being pushed ahead a year.
yeah.
I felt I didn't feel confident with women at that stage. That disappeared in coming years, but at that stage, I yeah, I was very clumsy and not confident.
And later on, did you have a family or any?
No, I nearly did, but I moved in a different direction. I mean, I've never actually been married. I've had long-term relationships, which are probably longer than many people's marriages. Uh, but we never actually had children.
Uh-huh.
And I know I've missed a lot from that. It's a whole other experience of life. I have many friends who've had children, and I see what it's meant for them and how they are. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I had. I'd have had to actually get serious jobs, bringing up
Yeah.
children, putting them through school, college. It's like they're a big expense, and I've always lived modestly. Just I can look after myself, and I earn enough for book royalties and talks to have kept myself going. So I've never become wealthy from any of this, but I've just always had just enough money to look after myself. If I had a family, I couldn't have had the career I had. I'd have had to get serious jobs and things.
Yeah. Similar
So
path.
yeah, so I know I've missed a lot, but also I'm very happy where I am and the life I've had. So you can't have everything in life.
Right. I want to pause for a minute and see if I can stop the drumming that's going on. If I could figure out where the recording is.
Right. Yeah.
So back again without the drumming, and we were up to your meditation book, which has just come out, and that's how I rediscovered you, was your wonderful free downloads that we listen to almost every day.
Ah,
The, so how did that come about? You'd already done the TM and
yes, yes. I've done 14 books now, which is enough.
wow.
Enough for one lifetime. Whenever I finish, I say never again, never again. It's a lonesome occupation writing, because I've done a couple of books, co-authored a couple of books. They were more enjoyable in a way because you're having conversations, you're working things out. But writing on your own, it's like you're holding this whole thing yourself, and you
Yeah.
and it's lonesome. And I'd be, less social. I, long to, going out for dinner with friends at the end of a writing day was like luxury. It was so good. So anyway, yes, the recent book on meditation, you mean How to Meditate Without Even Trying, that one?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my last book. I check in a year's time whether that's really true. Um, that came, I say, meditation has been a part of my life, and I've been teaching meditation off and on. And one of the things with TM, right at the beginning, what the Maharishi said was meditation should be effortless. If you put any effort or trying into meditation, you're making the mind more active, more tense. Whereas what we're really about is letting the thinking mind relax. And so effort was sort of counterproductive. And over the years, I've really worked with that in myself and come up with various practices that I found really help take out any faint sense of trying or anything, and been teaching this to people, and people really love it because almost every technique there is, not all of them, but almost every technique is about concentrating the attention, focusing on this. Meditation's difficult. You've got to try hard. If you're not getting anywhere, you're not trying hard enough. Which is always part of our culture. If you don't succeed, try harder.
Hmm.
And people take that attitude into meditation, where it is totally the opposite, I found. The less you try, the more successful you will be. And so over the years, I've been exploring this and, say, developing various practices, ways of weeding out any faint effort or anything that comes in, and how to deal with some of the stuff that comes up in meditation, not just thoughts, but feelings, etc. All about letting go. I see meditation as just letting go and just sitting quietly with yourself, which may sound easy, sitting quietly with yourself, and you can probably do it for 5 seconds, most people. So it's about, how do we actually do that? And so I decided to write this book. I mean, I felt I'd learned so much about how to make meditation just be easy and enjoyable. I didn't want to leave this planetary realm without having put it all down. And so I just wrote that book to really bring together everything I've learned over the years.
Well, it's the recordings that downloaded that are what
Uh,
really your voice is magical in terms of calming, and it's just it takes me back to the global brain too, and you
yeah.
have a perfect voice for doing that. So
Uh,
I have five of the main ones, and then there was a sixth one. Are there going to be any more?
um, yes, there's a couple more. Yes, a couple
I'll
more
look forward
lessons.
to
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Well, I want to go back to how did you get to the States? And I was said, is he still on a houseboat in Sausalito, or somebody thought you were in Tiburon? You've bounced around Northern California, but
Not
how'd you
not as
get
much
here?
not as much as you might think. So when the Global Brain came out, I was on because it got a lot of attention, the book as well. I was on the lecture circuit here, media circuit, and things. And so from England, I would come across, probably 3 times a year for a month, 6 weeks, um, doing that, speaking at conferences, whatever it was. And at that stage, this is the 80s. I basically I based myself in LA. I had a very good friend. You may have heard Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote
Oh
The
yeah,
Aquarian.
Marilyn, good
Yeah,
friend. Yeah.
yeah. So I was always welcome at her house, and so LA became my sort of base to fly out of
Uh-huh.
LA to where I was going, give a talk in Dallas or somewhere. So LA became my base for the 80s. But then every time I came up to the Bay Area, I felt there's so many people here I want to hang out with. I mean, Ram Dass was living here then. There's
Hmm.
Esalen, Mike Murphy, all those people. And most of the people I was really interested in as teachers or exemplars lived in the Bay Area. And so in the 90s, I just shared a house with a friend. They had some friends who were living there, a couple, and they had a spare bedroom. And so when I was in the States, I'd come and stay at their place. So San Francisco became my base and started developing community here. But I was still coming and going, because then visa requirements were I could come for 3 months and had to leave for 3 months, come for 3 months, leave
Right.
for 3 months. And then in 2000, I think 2001, I got a green card so I could stay here longer. And gradually, my trips became more and more here, less and less in England. So I never actually upped to move to America. I never packed up and said, I'm moving to America. I sort of gradually gravitated to America. I still have a place in London and I go back there sometimes. It's mostly rented out. And I've got rid of nearly all my stuff in London and got lots of stuff here. So I think if home is where your stuff is, then
Yeah.
this is my home. So I never, up to moved here. It was just a gradual process. And now I feel this is my functional home. This is where I am. And I go back to England probably once a year for a few weeks, something like that.
Did you actually have a houseboat in Sausalito?
No, I had a real boat in Sausalito,
Oh,
an old um, cabin cruiser, motor yacht, very old, but it was nearly as old as me. Lovely design, wooden boat. Really loved it. It was a beautiful boat. I lived on that for 19 years in
wow.
Sausalito. I had one of the best um, slips in the whole of Sausalito. I could see from Mount Tam all the way around to the city. I was right at the end of the dock. So it was lovely. I love being on the water. It's always different from one moment to the next. What the
Yeah.
wind is doing, what the seals are doing, and the birds and people. I loved it, but it was getting a bit small, and I just felt after a while I need a change. I need a change, and I'd always been drawn to Sebastopol. I was actually drawn to Sausalito because of Alan Watts, first of
Yeah.
all, because he was writing his books always said Alan Watts at the end, Alan Watts, Sausalito, California. And so my very first trip to the US was in 1973. I made a beeline for Sausalito. I mean, by that time, Alan Watts had moved up into Mill Valley. Um, so I sort of that drew me to Sausalito. And then this friend later had this boat. She was leaving to go and live on land with her boyfriend. And she said, did I want it? And I said, yes. And her boat happened to be almost a stone's throw from Alan Watts's boat. So I could see
Uh-huh.
his boat out my window.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The old ferry boat, converted ferry boat.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was in Mill Valley in the 70s. That's where I started my center, and I lived across the street from Mike Murphy. It was
Uh-huh.
actually Dulcie who talked me into buying the house I was renting when
Ah,
the owner wanted to sell it, and she wanted 75,000 for it, and I knew she'd paid 35,000, and I was just horrified because I'd done some remodeling of it for her. And Dulcie said, "They ain't making hillside property anymore." So I bought it and then later sold it for 150,000, and then the guy
yeah,
tore it down and built $1 million house on the same
yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah.
So, um, what else? See, when did you move to Sausalito? I mean, Sebastopol. I get the S's.
Yes, Sebastopol 2014.
Uh-huh. So you've been there 12 years.
And I was on the boat 90, yeah, 12 years. I moved onto the boat 95. Yeah, so 19 years I was on the boat.
And we were visiting Susan and Peter, Susan Campbell, a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know how your name came up, but she said, "Oh, I talk to him all the time." So that's what
Yeah,
initiated. She said, "I'll connect you," because
yeah.
I had,
Susan's one of my longest, I don't want to say oldest, um, longest known friends in America back in the when I very first started coming in the 70s occasionally. Susan was running the Institute for Conscious Evolution, and that tied in with what I was thinking, and we met each other and sort of stayed in touch over the years. And then had visited her in Sebastopol. So when I moved here, she was my first point of contact.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I had a friend already in Sebastopol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she actually lived down the street from Murphy's and me in Mill Valley when I lived there.
Yeah.
And it was through her partner that I met my co-author in Denver. But then I didn't know about the Getting Real work. And I was up in at the what was it, the Health and Harmony Fair they had
Oh
every
yes,
year.
yes.
And I was there to track down John Robbins. We had started the Alliance for Transforming the Lives of Children. I wanted to ask him to join our advisory board, and I went to where he was going to be, and it was Susan talking. I said, "Why does she seem so familiar to me?" And I loved what she was talking about, and that led to my doing her weekends and honesty
Good.
salons, and she
Yes,
spoke at a couple of our summits, and ever since she's been like my mentor in that arena. So small world again.
yes, yeah.
Um, well, I think we should wrap up here pretty soon. I have to catch a flight out of Dulles.
Okay.
But
Anything else you want to
what
briefly
parting
ask?
words? Yeah, what sort of things would you like to leave for our viewers? Well, I wanted to say that how you fit into this, if it isn't obvious, is you brought the global perspective through your work as I was getting influenced by all these amazing people in the 70s and 80s
Yes.
in Marin and the Northern California area. Uh, that video just really was amazing, along with Starhawk's work on patriarchy. And
Yeah.
uh, so I consider you a wellness guru. Uh, the word wellness was unknown in the 70s, and we had to
Hmm.
spell it on the phone. But
Yes.
and now it's been dumbed down to the level where it's dog food was the number one hit if you Googled it. That's since faded somewhat, but the breadth of wellness that Halbert Dunn had, who inspired me, is way bigger than the current meaning. So
Mm.
that's why I've so glad to bring you into the fold of the many people that have influenced me. So.
So thank you. Yeah.
And your parting wisdom for future viewers, put you on the spot.
I think it's very simple. It's what many people have said is be kind to each other.
Amen. Yes. Well,
Kindness can change the world.
I just found a pin here called Make America Kind Again.
There you
And
go.
well, thank you, Peter. It's been a delight. And I'm going to end the recording. And